Hey everybody, welcome to the Strive Summit podcast. With me today I have Jacob Hansen. Jacob, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us what you're doing, what's going on with you.
Alex, thanks for having me here today. I've had a lot of changes recently, seen a lot in the last couple of years of my professional career. So, to be honest, this is one of the earliest podcasts that I've ever done. I've done a handful before, but really excited to introduce myself here. My background and what's bringing me here today, obviously the BIM focus and construction orientation started a few years back. I started in the residential industry doing electrical work. I started as an electrical apprentice there. Really grew into that. Was something that I really didn't expect would happen. I remember talking to my wife about it early on, and it's funny being here today. I was like, I really think I could make a career out of construction. I could find a career in doing something, down this path. And so much has changed since then. I've gone from residential into commercial into some of the most advanced construction projects in the world, building semiconductor fabs and data centers and EV facilities. So it's been a really exciting journey. Can walk you through a little bit of it. Transition from building. Oh, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
you're good. No, that's great. We're definitely going to get into that, but what I got to know is through all this high-tech stuff, is there any technologies or softwares or anything you've been kind of like you've touched on or played with? I noticed you mentioned something about a pilot on your LinkedIn account. Like, what's going on with that?
So there's a lot to unbury there. The latter as a pilot, yep, there's just straight private pilot license through the FFA. So really excited about that. I took on that journey to become a pilot about 2 years ago. Been flying as much as I can, take the family everywhere. That was more of a personal endeavor. No commercial application to that. Can't pay me for that. So keep that off the table for now. I don't want to get in trouble with any government listeners on this. Other than that, software side and technology and really being part of this world, I'll keep it simple. A lot of my work's been basic Autodesk platforms, Navisworks and Revit. I love Navisworks, the tools and the capabilities that it affords to coordinate a project, to bring people together. It doesn't get any easier, any better than that.
All right, so Navisworks is a fan favorite. Perfect.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to get into this a little earlier than we typically do on podcasts, but you're a younger guy. I think you might have an inspiring story. I don't know it yet, but I want to hear your BIM journey. I want to hear from when you first heard about architecture, structure, touched CAD or anything, all the way through to where you're at today and why you're so happy to be here today.
Well, Alex, BIM was something about 5 years ago I had no idea it even existed. Never heard of it growing up through grade school, high school, pursuing any college options. I got into college about 2.5 years through it and had no idea what BIM was. I'll be the one to admit that I had a lot of what you do professionally sometimes comes to people you know, not so much what you know. And so I had the opportunity through a family member. They said, hey, got an acquaintance working out on a semiconductor project. They're looking for just some entry-level BIM help. Get in there, start doing detailing, spooling, maybe do a little field coordination. So I got brought in on a project out here in Arizona, and shoot, man, within the first couple months, I think 3 months, was kind of fed to the wolves. They put me out in a fab all by myself, up in a sub-fab floor. If you've ever been in them before, very loud, congested with tools. You got people walking around in bunny suits, and you got scrubs on and gloves on, and so just a completely different environment from what I was used to. Well, what it turned into, I was out there working with electrical crews, process piping crews, just sitting there day in and day out coordinating models with them. They'd come up with their drawings, their sheet views, and their plans, and they say, hey, you know what, before we go hang all this pipe or these supports up, can you walk us through the model? And it really early on it clicked for me. I was like, wow, why do we not do this more in what we do and in how we plan and how we process our work? To simply go through and look at some content and get a layout for it and understand what you're actually building, that made the world of difference for these guys. And it's really just taken off.
So back up a little bit. You went to college. What'd you go to college for?
Oh, that's a long story. I'll keep it short. Initially, I thought I was going for engineering. It turned into more healthcare. I thought I was going to go towards medical school route. Got about 2.5 years through, transferred over to Arizona State University with the intentions of doing like biomedical engineering. And within that first couple months, I dropped out of the math classes. Like, I don't want to make a career out of this. And I was like, okay, what can I do with 2.5 years worth of credits to be able to get through college fast, not waste a ton more money and time? And I found an awesome program at ASU called the Organizational Leadership Program, part of their Bachelor of Arts degrees, and loved it. Graduated 2.5 years later with that. Then I quickly rolled into, within a couple months, I went up to, well, it was online, Western Governors University, got a master's in management and leadership. And then about a year later, I got my MBA. And so my educational track has been really focused on organizational leadership, management, and it really ties into the BIM side of it, ironically enough. You're coordinating with people, you're working with PMs, you're building buildings, you're working on these projects, and it requires those skill sets. So it was awesome to have the professional and the educational experience hand in hand. I wouldn't have traded that for anything.
Yeah, you definitely have to figure out how to motivate people the right way when you're definitely coordinating a
Oh,
job with different contractors and stuff.
oh yeah.
Um, okay, so we're gonna go back even further. What got you into engineering? What was the spark you were like, I'm gonna go do an engineering? Was it because you were good at math or because you wanted to build things?
I love the math. Maybe some of it was in the blood. My grandfather had his PhD in water resource engineering.
Oh, wow.
A couple of his sons, I think three of them, are licensed engineers today up in Utah, and so it's always just been kind of in the family a little bit. I was always around people that were engineers, just really kind of drawn to it. But the more I got into school and the deeper I got into some of the engineering or math classes, like, I don't know if I want to do this.
Can you explain what water resource engineering is?
So he helped design and develop water resource or water treatment plants. He did dams. He did anything that had to do with any type of water or moving bodies of water for engineering or energy. He did that. He did all around the world. He was in Mexico, Asia, all over the United States. So it was really cool to hear his stories and to hear the stories from my dad as well. He was the youngest of 10 kids and traveled all over when he did this.
Yeah, that's
So
exciting.
I think growing up, that kind of instilled it in me. And maybe that's what led me to where I am today. I like the ideas of building and working on something, and I want to see a project all the way through and see what it looks like when it's completed.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have a theory that, well, not a theory, I guess water resource engineering is a sub of civil,
Yes.
correct? Okay,
Yes.
awesome. Like I originally, when I was coming out of school, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go be a civil engineer. I'm gonna build bridges and roads and stuff, and that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took a way different path. Went way left, then way right, and then again, same thing as you. I didn't know BIM existed for 3-4 years ago, and I was doing it for 7 years. I was on the manufacturing side, where
Hmm.
I don't think BIM is a term that's typically used, but for anyone listening who's on the manufacturing or like automotive side of engineering, to me, and you may disagree with me, Jacob, all of that is BIM.
Yes.
That is building information management, building information modeling. It's all the same thing, whether you have a 3D model of a car with all the parts in it, whether you have a conveyor belt or machine that's going to make candy or toys or whatever to dyes and everything. All that is BIM. It's just construction industry blew it up to the nines, and now every step of the way for this massive building instead of a manufacturing plant. So
Well, and that's what's exciting, to tie those two together, which is where the industry's heading, where the world's heading as a whole, is a term that's been widely used on the engineering, the design side, manufacturing, that's bringing construction in, is a term called design for manufacturing.
DFMA.
DFM, yep, exactly. And so that's where I reside a little bit, not so much on the technical side, but the coordination and the facilitating that integration, that's exactly where I want to be. And that's what the industry needs. You talk
Yep.
about assembly lines, you talk about production manufacturing. You got to get the construction and mindset to say, hey, this is why we're building the building. This is what it's going to support.
Yeah, DFMA to me is just that extra level of information that is not necessarily in the miles that you need, but you put it in. So,
Yeah.
like, you get an architectural model, well, then you put the studs in the architectural wall, right? That's that DFMA portion. And then you take each individual stud out and you put it through a machine that cuts it to a size, and that's DFMA. And then you have it all labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, and they put it together on the assembly line 1, 2, 3, 4. That's DFMA. That's a whole process. Like BIM is a process. I think DFMA is a process on top of BIM. Just like
Exactly.
when you would use Kobe, right? That's just another process, another extra you put in. That's personal opinion about DFMA, but I find it interesting.
Well,
No,
I'm
that's-
glad we share some of the same sentiments about it. It's exciting. I think it puts us on the right track.
Yeah, I've definitely had a little bit of experience with that in the past when I worked for a company before we did. I was part of, call them out, Allied if you're listening, great on you. I worked for Allied, and we did projects that were, here's every stick of lumber, here's every cut, here's every label, here's every number for every wall, and that came brought in from back in my manufacturing days at Natural Builders at the modular factory. So
Hmm.
going through that, you had to list out every part and every piece for every guy at every station. We had 36 stations, and stations would go, you know, one station would be the floor prep, then the floor organization, then the paneling on the floor, then the walls get put in a different section and get brought over, and then the walls go on, then the ceiling gets flown over. And all these parts and pieces are getting built separately and come together as it comes down the line. The call it the sucky part of DFMA is if during that whole process you mess up that one thing, which I've had this done to me, and God bless the team on the floor for not kicking me in the face. The wrong window was put into the wrong building or the wrong box, and then you have to tell them as it's down the line or out in the yard, hey, by the way, yeah, that window has to be smaller or that window has to be bigger. I've definitely had like 2 or 3 of those. You learn really quick on what not to mess up and what to look into.
Yeah,
That's for
no,
sure.
absolutely. You gotta. That's where the attention to detail, the QC, all of that comes into play.
So, what kind of DFMA have you done in the past that you're willing to talk about?
Honestly, not extensive because a lot of my time within the BIM industry and construction has been big picture. I mean, we're doing what's referred to as base build or tool install
Mm-hmm.
construction phases on these fabs, and so we're talking more. We're putting in a whole electrical system with transformers, distribution panels, and power panels, or we're talking about a spec gas highway. And so we don't get into the finer details. When we get down to the points where we're talking about a POC or some sort of connection or interconnect, that's where there's a little more coordination. We may facilitate some conversations with the system owners or tool owner to say, hey, you know what how specific does this routing need to be? Are we going to stop at a certain elevation off the floor? Are you going to do a field fit? Or it really just varies, project to project, customer, their level of development. There's so much you could look at, but that's generally what I've focused on up until about now.
So, did you have a chance to work with any like 3D scanners and stuff to verify that in the field, or to make
Oh,
sure that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
3D.
was your
I mean,
experience with that?
so I've actually worked with around them for a majority of my BIM career, actually, working on a couple different semiconductor facilities, mostly for subcontractor use. We've been able to go out and verify multiple phases, whether it's just existing conditions, or we're verifying some of these fabs we worked in were like 20 years old. So 20 years ago, I'll tell you, a lot of those systems weren't BIMmed. There's no models there.
No.
So we at that time we were using the Pharaohs. Recently used the Leica RTC 360. Really loved that
Nice.
product.
Yep.
I mean that's the way to go, especially at least in this specific market and the projects we're working on. I understand it's not going to be a typical tool or workflow for something smaller, where you could use like a BLK to go or something else. It's a little more practical. But so we've done verified existing conditions. We do a lot of validation after installs. We'll go in there, and whether it's used for quantity surveying, where you're counting or measuring. So it's just awesome. Really awesome products. Really great tools.
Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know what a 3D scanner is, basically it just shoots millions and millions of colored points every second, and then all those points come together like like an art dot picture, but it's a 3D space. Now, I have a question. Like, I've always compared Leica to the BMWs and stuff because they're fantastic and great, but they are specialty. They keep everything Leica. And I've always compared Faro to GM Dodge. Is like, what? They're kind of secluded, but you can figure out a way to make them work. I think they're more open. Now, there are other scanners and companies out there. How would you... this might be controversial. How would you compare Leica to Faro based on your uses?
At least in my specific uses, I would stand behind the Leica. At least in its modern state. A couple years ago, Faro probably had a little more of an advantage before the 360 came out and the way the Cyclone Register works nowadays. I really love the RTC 360. It's quick, it's efficient, the processing is extremely fast, given you have proper control points and you got everything figured out beforehand. Yeah, it makes it a lot easier on the back end. But not to say that I don't like the Faro. I don't think it's a great product. It's definitely a great product. But for our use cases, it's always been the 360 that's been a little more applicable.
Yeah, if you're gonna use Leica, use everything Leica. Don't try and mix and match it.
Yeah.
It all works very well together.
Well, and
Give it.
my favorite part, the customers are happy. They get what they want and more, and that's the exciting part when they realize the capacity that it has, the ability for them to view their projects in a completely different way that they've ever seen. I mean, they get ecstatic. It's awesome to see.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. So, what are you doing now? Where are you at? What
So
you been up to?
now, like I said at the beginning of this, quite a few changes recently. I'm now independent. I have been for the last couple of years. Started an LLC a few years ago, Hansen Consulting Group. So I'm running with that full time now. Continuing to work on different projects, supporting different customers. My basis is going to be in BIM consulting, more specifically BIM coordination. I think that's where my experience and my skill set lies. But I'm going to expand that into BIM as a whole. We're talking BIM modeling, detailing, reality capture, field support, in addition to some construction management services as well. One of the things I've seen in the last couple of years within these industries is bringing a variety of people and stakeholders together, and it takes a team to do that. And so my goal is to partner with other suppliers, other customers, and clients to say, hey, you know what, we found a way that we can make your projects more efficient. We found a way that you can use specific tools or workflows that'll identify some of your risks or some of your bottlenecks that we can help alleviate.
Hmm.
You mentioned a little earlier, with the advancements of so much technology and softwares out there, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. And this may not be a popular belief, but I'm one to say, let's just bring it back to the basics. We've got everything we need. Let's figure out a better way to use it. Let's figure out a better way to use our people, to have them look at the right things in the right times in the right places. And I think that's what people need.
Yeah, I definitely, and I totally get that. There was a time where I was working and we were working with a company trying to figure out like they're thinking about getting into Revit. And we're like, well, do you need Revit, right? And so let's talk about your workflow. And it was, I think it was CAD and Advanced Steel. And I don't remember exactly what they did, but they were like, well, we want to use Revit because everyone else is using Revit. And I was like, well, what is it? What does it mean to you? Like, what do you have to give to everyone else? Oh no, we get everything from people. We don't have to give them anything. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, what's your workflow like? Well, we do this, this, and this. I'm like, that's pretty simple. Like, the amount of work to get that into Revit, I don't think Revit's worth it to you. I think what you have is the correct workflow. There's no need to change what you have. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what you're talking about. Is like Revit, 85% of the time that people want to get into Revit need to be in Revit. Some of these manufacturer plants that are in Advanced Steel or Plant 3D and something, they're doing just fine without it, but they're getting pressure to use Revit. You got to ask yourself, why are we getting Revit? What are we exporting to the clients to share? What are they giving us to see and use, right?
Yeah.
That's where Revit comes in handy because it's becoming the more norm than AutoCAD. I would say it's still about 50-50. There's still people out there doing AutoCAD wanting to get into it. But I think if you're working on big projects, everyone expects Revit, Navisworks, exports, and things like that. That's just kind of the general expectation. Unless you're overseas and outside of the U.S. That's just kind of the expectation. So if you're a manufacturing company working with companies and they're always giving you Revit files, and you're thinking maybe I need to get in Revit, you got to think about what you need to get to your shop to manufacture. Does it require you to have Revit to coordinate properly, or can you do everything you have right now? So, no, I definitely get back down to basics. That's huge.
Well, that last part you mentioned there about shops and whatnot, that's one of the biggest challenges is you could have a big project like a semiconductor fab, a $20 billion project, and you could have 100 plus stakeholders on it, different subcontractors, GCs. They may say, yeah, we're going to use Revit. That's what we're doing. But the downstream from that is you got to think all these subcontractors have their workflows, the way that their shops are set up. How are they doing the materials? How are they counting all this? How are they doing their fabrication? They've had workflows that have been set up for years. So to demand that, there's so much that goes into that. And that's why, personally, I don't want to get into that. I think there's people, they're figuring that out. It's more of, okay, rather than demanding we use a specific software, how can we take what we have? What data are you looking for? And why does it matter? And what are you going to do with it? I don't care what these people are modeling or whatever. I care what they're giving me and how we can coordinate this with another contractor. Or how can we meet the requirements of the owner to say, hey, the owner, this is what the owner wants at the end of the project. When you guys all leave and you're done, do they just have a pretty picture or do they have something they can use? And getting there is important, but more importantly is what they have at the end of the day in their hands.
Yeah, and also Real quick, if anyone's out there listening and they're part of a company and you've had the same Revit template for the past 5 years, you need to update it. You need to not only update it, you need to ask an outside source to come check out your work. I will tell you BIM, what was it called? BIM stagnation. All right? BIM stagnation happens a lot when people are like, oh, I have Revit, I have a workflow, perfect, it's never had needed a change, I don't need to update anything, it's been working fine. And then you think it works fine, and it works fine, and everyone masters it, and it's an amazing workflow because it's mastered. But are you doing everything efficiently that you can do? Do you need to relearn something new to make your workflow even better? Or do you ignore it because you've already mastered your workflow? I guarantee you there's companies out there that have had a BIM workflow and it works out great. The only thing that's changed is how the shop reads their drawings. And I know that as a fact. The shop will update all the time to make their efficiencies better, but it never happens in the department. Take the department, look at your workflow, look what's coming out. It's best to ask an outside source, Jacob for instance, to come in and say, this is our workflow, this is how the shop uses it. Because no one knows everything about Revit, and if they do, I want to meet them, and they got to be on this podcast.
Me too. I would love to be there with you.
The whole panel. The idea behind that is no one knows everything about Revit. I have a different mindset because I come from a different factory mindset. Jacob has a different mindset because he comes from a different factory mindset. We can come in and see what you're doing, and it's like, yeah, just so you know, you can hit this button and skip those 6 steps. You know, that's the knowledge that we have to keep pushing to the industry. I call it like, it's that trade knowledge, not book knowledge. So like in Revit, simple terms, if I hit apply before I hit OK, right, I can see the changes in my drawing before I exit out of my, visual settings. That's something that I don't know if that's taught in the book, but not many people know about it. They usually just skip apply and hit OK, and then they go back and forth. I teach that in my trainings, and I drill it in people's heads. They hit apply and OK. And now when I'm training, it's toward the end, and I just say hit OK. They mean you hit apply and OK? And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
No, definitely seek some outside source, even if it's just to like review a workflow. It doesn't have to be, they don't have to be a full-blown consultant coming and everything, just review a workflow. I think it's massive. Even if it's a massive help, especially when someone outside comes in and looks at what you're doing. Just a suggestion, throwing it out there.
Let me share an experience about that if you don't mind. One of the customers I worked with within the recent years, there's a lot of factors that went into this. Let's just say there's one GC and you have a couple subs underneath them. All of them came with a different idea, understanding, tools that they were using. Some were using like Plant 3D, some were using CAD MEP to produce their drawings. The ultimate customer, the GC on this, said, hey, you know what? At the end of the day, we want you to just trace our designs. And we figured out, it's like, it doesn't matter what you're using. But what I was able to do was to be able to integrate between those parties and say, hey, you know what? This is what the customer's looking for. And we walked through both of those subcontractors' workflows and said, okay, let's figure out what's necessary, what's not. And they were actually able to change some things, exactly what you're talking about. They didn't go revamp everything, but they said, okay, this is how we're going to do it. This is what the customer wants. And it took a couple months to kind of get that underneath us and realize what was going on. But once we did, we took off from there. Models had less issues. We were getting them turned over much, much faster. And in the back end, a couple months later, when we're installing it out in the field, it just became a lot more efficient. We were running into less issues. We weren't having as many clashes. We weren't having as many fabrication issues. Sometimes you'd get a problem. It's like, well, these welds aren't going to work here, or these supports aren't going to work here. We cleaned up a lot of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And everyone, please, Jacob, where can they reach you?
They can reach me on LinkedIn. They can email me. Pretty easy to find me, Hansen Consulting Group. I'm working on a website right now, but I'm trying to just definitely build more of a social presence. Grateful to Alex for having me here today. I think this is a big step in that. But my phone number is available. We'll find a way to get connected.
Call Jacob. Just ask. Go ask on LinkedIn. The thing he can say is like, no, you're good. And like, or he could say, change this little thing. Or he can say, look, yeah, you haven't updated in 15 years, bro.
Yeah. It's funny. Your point to just ask. That's one of the biggest things I talk about with subcontractors all the time. you'll have a crew go out there and install X number of linear feet of pipe or conduit, and they come back and say, hey, it's not working. It's like, hey, if you came to me 5 hours ago and I walked you through it, I could have told you that. We wouldn't ever have this problem. 5 minutes of your time will save you hundreds of hours, up to hundreds of hours, and flexible, of course, there, and energy and money and resources that otherwise you wouldn't have to deal with.
That's a great,
just a little bit of
yeah.
time.
Just ask. That's a great point. So I've gone back and forth a little bit on how do you show the true value of BIM, right? Every time a company, GC, whatever, says I want a BIM quote or whatever, or you're trying to sell someone on BIM, it's a lot of empty promises. It's a lot like you're going to save money, you're going to be more efficient. This is what we're going to do for you. There's nothing tangible or monetary you can say that I'm going to save you this much money because of that point right there. If they spent 5 hours laying that pipe and realized it didn't fit and then came to you and asked about it, right? What is that cost? What was the labor? What was the pipe? What's the stuff they got to cut out? What's they got to fix?
Yeah.
All of that could have been saved by the one question of will this fit? That is the monetary value of BIM. Is will this fit? Or I don't know. That was just a perfect example of how do you value BIM? Right there. That's how you value BIM. It's the cost of labor. All that could have been avoided with an hour, 30-minute conversation, maybe a 10-second question. You know, that could have been avoided and saved so much money. I don't know. That's just something I got to add there. Sorry to hijack
absolutely.
it.
No, absolutely. That's exactly where it needs to be. I mean, not, in addition to what you talked about, you got to talk about change orders, the delays to schedule it, the delays to schedule you cause, and that's probably one of the biggest ones, especially with where semiconductors today. It's growing fast. It's moving really fast. You could say a lack of people, skilled people, tradesmen all over the place. So the better we can be at saving our time, getting stuff done the first time, and doing it right, that means more than anything. And yeah, it is. I'll be honest with you. It's hard to quantify BIM when you're looking forward and saying, hey, how much can you save me? It's like, well, I don't have an answer for you. Wish I did. I wish I could, honestly. Like, we want to be there. But there's almost I don't want to call it a blind trust, but you got to have a little bit of faith to say, hey, you know what? If I put a person on a project, if I give you some advice or instruction as to, how to set up a workflow or how to coordinate your project, I know it's going to work for you. I've seen it. I've done it. I can't put a number to it, but I know it's going to work, and that's what I'm hoping we can get to.
I think we'll get there one day. I mean, a real goal would be submitting all models to state and getting approved per version instead of paper documents and stat prints. But that's a pipe dream at the moment.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. So, someone's getting into BIM. They don't know where to start. You're a young guy. What would you suggest to them if they really want to start getting into BIM?
I'm a little jaded on this one. I have a personal preference. The way I got started, I got thrown right into the field. And I probably couldn't have had a better experience. And to probably answer an earlier question, kind of my background and my path to where I am now, I sat in a semiconductor subfab. I was out there with trade crews, electrical and piping. I learned the systems. I learned how they work in that environment. I learned how to view and coordinate a model. They taught me how to QC in real time, like what problems are we looking for? What things do we need to mitigate? And it's not always things that are on a checklist either. It's like more of, hey, is this constructible? That's not something you put on a paper. You have to have experience and an understanding, what parts are in a system, how do they operate, where do they go, you have clearance issues, and there's so much more that go into that. So to answer your latter question, how do people get started? One, come talk to me. I'll help you find a way. One of the basic ways is to get out there and get the hands-on experience. And I would say probably starting with either field technician, where you're doing reality capture, you're doing BIM coordination, you're sitting there on a team, and you're learning day in and day out. I took it a little farther. The opportunity I had with the client that were employer at the time, they said, hey, you know what? We're gonna have you field coordinate, but we're also going to have you when there's change orders or there are issues, we got to reroute something, we're going to have you the one to model it. We're not going to kick it back to a modeling team. You're going to sit there in the field. We did hand-drawn ISOs. We'd go get measurements with a tape measure. We'd come back to Revit. So I not only learned Navis, but I learned Revit. I sat there. I learned how to draw electrical and process systems. And then you learned on the back end, they're like, hey, you know what? Our spooling team's a little tied up. Can you do the spools on that and get those over to the shop? So it was really, I kind of had a really awesome experience, really grateful for the people that gave me that opportunity. But don't overthink it. Start somewhere simple, something that you can grasp. Even if you don't know a single thing about BIM like I did, you can get into it. That's what I think what's one of the coolest things about it.
I was gonna say, like, there's definitely the path of that I like to push is do the trades for 2 to 4 years.
Mhm.
If you don't like it after that, find any contractor doing Revit and get hired instantly. Hey,
Yes.
I'm a plumber from the field. I need a job. Cool. I want to sit behind a computer and design. Perfect. Here's your seat. I'll make the position for you tomorrow. Like, that's how in demand trade knowledge is. Not only for the trades, but also in the computers, behind the computers. Because a lot of people coming out of school or going into that, there's a huge skills gap.
Yeah.
So when I first started, right, a lot of it was, okay, you just came from school, you know how to design 3D, design this plumbing system. What do you mean design it? Okay, here it
Yeah.
is. It's not sloped eighth inch. Well, I didn't know. What do you mean slope eighth inch? What does that mean, right? Go into the trades, get the knowledge. Or you know what? Hold on, I got.
Let's see it.
Okay, so I bought this book, and it's like, okay, I'll read the title: The Visual Handbook of Building and Remodeling. If you guys can see this right here, if it's not backwards, this book has images of how to pipe, how to wire, what joist needs to be there for snow load, everything you can imagine. And it's got pictures in it. When you first start out and you're not doing a trade, but you really want to get into construction, you buy this book, and then you go do an interview and you tell them, "Yeah, I know how to build things. Like this book right here is the reason my wife thinks I can do everything."
There you go.
Right now.
We'll keep that a secret.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you make a model once of your house, and then all of a sudden you're making dreams come true, right?
Oh yeah.
Don't show it.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Jacob, any last words, any last plug you want to give before we head out?
Yeah, just to rephrase what I said earlier, keep it simple. We gotta find ways to facilitate more communication. Find ways to bring project teams together. You're gonna find every industry is gonna be different in how you approach this. I'm gonna talk specifically about the semiconductor here. You have some big teams. You have people all over the place. You could have up to 10,000 people on a project on a given day.
Mm-hmm.
And so you gotta know that there's people all over the place, and being patient, being willing to work with each other, being open to new ideas, and BIM falls right in line with that. It's pushing the boundaries all the time. It's causing us to rethink the way that we look at projects, the way that we write contracts, the way that we coordinate and facilitate MEP installs, architecture, concrete. It's going to affect everybody out there, and we need to be patient. We need to work through it. And I like to throw out there that's exactly what I'm here for. That's what Hansen's Consulting Group is here for. We want to help everybody we possibly can, within reason. Contractors, subcontractors, GCs, owners, anybody. Say, hey, there's a way to figure this out. We want to help you do that.
Awesome. Well, Jacob, thanks again for coming on. I appreciate it. We'll have to have you on again. We'll talk more about how your venture's going. If you guys like what you're listening to, please feel free to like, subscribe, and follow Everything Strive on all socials, especially on LinkedIn and YouTube. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Alex.